Hi, my name is Dr. Rob Austin McKee, Professor of Organizational Behavior and Leadership at the University of Houston downtown, here with mgt.edu, the Open Access Business School. In this video, we'll be discussing principles of change and change management. So, in this video, we are going to cover the following things. We're going to define organizational change and change more broadly. We're going to uncover 3 truths about change, and we're going to transition into a discussion about how to change. So, let's start with a few quotes here. One commonly misattributed to Mr. Charles Darwin is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Jack Welch says, change before you have to. Gandhi says, be the change you want to see in the world. And finally, from Anatole France, all changes, even the most longed for, have their melancholy. For what we leave behind us is a part of ourselves. We must die to one life before we can enter another. Lots of books about change out there. This is just seeing what's available on Amazon. Thousands of books about change. Lots of songs about change. This is just a handful of them, really, but we've got some big names up there. We got Tupac, Bob Dylan, Jimi Hendrix, all kinds of people. Look through it. I'm sure you'll find at least somebody that you like. Politics about change, right? So whether you're on the left, the progressive side, Jimmy Carter, Bernie Sanders, let's try some things we've never done before type of change, or whether you're on the conservative, regressive side saying we need to take America back to a place that it was before now, let's make America great again, or the shortened Donald Trump version, just let's make America great again. Nobody runs a campaign promising to maintain the status quo. Nobody says, if you elect me, I promise I won't do anything. And sadly, we live in a time where that might be a pretty powerful campaign message. Just like, I won't mess anything up any more than it's already messed up. I'll just leave things the way they are so that they don't get worse. Anyway, one of the most iconic political images of our time is just this, right? It's just a kind of interestingly edited photo of a man's face. An abstract take on the American flag is the sun rising over some fields and the word change. It doesn't even tell you if it's a good change or a bad change. And certainly some people took it as a good change or a bad change, but it's kind of neutral in terms of its value, just the word change. We interpret that as meaning that must be good. Change is good. We have this connotation of change as good, but is that justified? So let's figure out what we mean by this term change. And further by the term organizational change. So change, very broadly, is just a difference in the form, quality, or condition of something over time. So something exists in a certain state, and that state changes. There has been, as I said, a change, right? So anytime there's a difference between the form, quality, or condition of something over time, a change has occurred. Now, oftentimes, as I mentioned a few moments ago with the Obama poster, we have this conception of change as being a positive thing, as the movement from some present state towards some desired future state. So we have this idea of change as getting better. With respect to organizations, that can mean an increase in efficiency or effectiveness, an increase in revenues, profits, or decreased costs. Importantly, in organizations, we, all of us, often resist change. Why do we resist change? And a lot of times it's very inconsequential changes. Why do we resist? So at least part of it is this sense of self-interest and a fear of loss. So imagine you exist within an organizational hierarchy. Okay? You have worked hard to achieve the role of manager or perhaps some other role even higher up in that hierarchy, and suddenly they're going to make extensive changes to the organization. Well, you've kind of already paid your dues into the organization to achieve your position, right? And if things change, what does that mean for you? You don't know, but you're concerned that it could negatively affect you. And I think that's entirely reasonable. If significant changes occur, maybe your job becomes superfluous or redundant. Who knows? Secondly, we may misunderstand the change or its reasons. A lot of this comes down to how the change is communicated, really. Why is the change occurring? If we don't understand the reasons for it or what it entails, we're more likely to resist it. Next, we may distrust the people behind the change. So you can imagine probably, again, in your organizations, they say, we're going to change this specific way that we're doing this thing. And you're like, they're changing it so they can shortchange us just a little bit more than they already are, right? We don't trust the people up above us in the organizations. And that goes right back to week 1 readings that we had from Jeffrey Pfeffer about what most people don't know about leadership and how there's this great distrust of management and leadership within our organizations. Sometimes you can genuinely believe that the change is a bad idea. You might understand the change, like, I know what this entails. I know why we're doing it. I just think it's stupid. That's totally fair, right? And finally, some people just have a low tolerance for change. So if we go back to week 2, when we were talking about personality, we had that idea of openness to experience. And we even related that to progressives and conservatives across the political spectrum. And the less open you are to change, the more you are going to resist change, right? So some of that's based on just personality. Inherent traits that we have. So if we expect people to resist change, sometimes even very minimal changes, what can we do as managers and leaders to help overcome that resistance to change? A lot of it just comes down to education and communication, right? Educating employees about what the change entails and what it means for them, why you're doing it, making sure you're communicating that across a wide variety of platforms, as many as you can, hopefully some of that face-to-face and not just via email. Allowing employees to participate in the change can be incredibly powerful. So if you've read any of the research on participative leadership, this involves getting people involved, giving them a say in the decision-making process. And it turns out when you do this, when you ask people for their input and consider their input, even if you make a decision that is contrary to their input, they're more likely to support that decision merely because they were a part of the process. As your last step here, coercion. That is not something I would recommend unless, of course, as a last result, which I said, because this is basically saying, hey, your job is to do what I say. I'm the manager, so you either do it or seek employment elsewhere. Obviously, you don't want to be that heavy-handed unless you have to be, so last resort. Now, let's do a little thought experiment here. So in the background of this picture, we have an 18-wheeler, a semi-truck. What would be the least effortful way that we could change the material condition of that truck? The least amount of effort we could put in to observe a change in the material condition of that truck. You might be thinking, oh, Rob, we could slash the tires. We could throw a brick at the windshield. We could, I don't know, scratch the paint maybe, or spray paint it, put some graffiti on it. They're all pretty low effort ways we could change, but lower effort than that. The least amount of effort we could put forth to witness a material condition in the change of that truck. And the answer is actually, it's so low effort that it's literally nothing, right? All you have to do is just sit and wait, and a change to the material condition of that truck will occur on its own. That is the nature of change, right? The paint will get faded from the sun, the tires will dry rot, metal will rust, a family of raccoons will take residence in the cab, and a competing family of squirrels will take residence in the engine compartment, and they'll have epic battles. I don't know. But you just have to wait, and it will change on its own. The same with everything else. Everything is constantly changing. So this thought experiment, does this reveal any universal truths about change? And obviously, I wouldn't ask the question if the answer was no. So it does reveal some universal truths about change. And let's talk about those. First, per Heraclitus, change is the only constant. And you have probably heard some variation of this quote before. But what I take this to mean is that change is inevitable. No matter what you do, change is going to occur. Nothing you can do to stop it. And I'm going to contrast that quote with another quote. This is from Martin Luther King Jr. Change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. So this seems to contradict the previous statement that change is inevitable. This says change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability. So how do we reconcile these two statements? How can both of these things be true? Well, the question is, what is the definition of change that we're referring to with each statement? If we go back to that earlier slide where we define change, there is change meaning any difference in the condition, form, or what have you of something over time. That's what we're talking about in the first case. In the second case, we're talking about things getting better. We're talking about purposeful change. And that's what Martin Luther King Jr. is talking about. What I take that statement to mean is that the status quo is powerful and chaos is powerful. So targeted change is difficult. So status quo, there are forces trying to keep things the way they are. Just a couple moments ago when we were talking about why people resist change, because, if you've achieved a high status the way the world is currently structured, you have every reason to try to keep it that way. And chaos is powerful. So all the forces that try to break things down, very powerful. So targeted change, improving something, is difficult. And if we think about that tractor trailer, let's say we wanted to create a targeted change in that tractor trailer, like to improve it. Say we wanted to transport it from Houston to Austin. That's what we need to do as an organization. That takes a lot of things going right to achieve that change, right? All the mechanical aspects in the engine and the tires, all things that have to go right. You have to have a competent driver. You have to have roadways that will sustain that vehicle, all kinds of things to create that targeted change. But if we know anything at this point after week 5, our discussion about the charismatic leadership tactics, we got that rule of 3, so two truths isn't enough. We need at least 3, and less than 4, more than 2, less than 4, that I think that's 3. So the last truth about change I want to talk about is that the rate of change seems to be increasing fairly rapidly, at least when it comes to technology. I want to explore this within the realm of music. So what I'm showing you right now is the way that the music industry looked in 1975. So LPs and EPs, those are records, kind of the big 12-inch things people used to listen to music on. We have 8 tracks, representing pretty good for 8 tracks, cassettes, very small, and a vinyl single. That's a record, but it just has just one song on it, the single. And now I want to fast forward just about 45 years or so to 2019 and see how different this looks. So as you can see here, the biggest category is now paid subscriptions, all right, streaming music digitally. We also have on-demand streaming. LPs and EPs are still up there, holding what I think is pretty respectable level after 45 years. Downloading albums, limited tiers, all these other things. CDs still on there. Download singles, synchronization, all this stuff. What I'm going to do on the next slide is to allow this to play through 45 years of changes in the music industry. And what I want you to pay attention to is the rise and fall of various technologies. From the previous slide, you'll see 8 tracks disappear within just a few years. In the same year that 8 tracks disappear, CDs are going to come on the scene. That's 1983-ish. You're going to see CDs rise up to absolutely dominate the market within a couple decades. They're going to absolutely dominate that market. And as you see, by 2019, not so dominant anymore, and we have a new technology. And I'll also say that around the time CDs start to dwindle, you'll see this huge proliferation in terms of technologies. And as we get toward 2019, some coalescing onto paid subscription services. So again, I'm going to let it play through. Feel free to rewind it if you want to see it again. So, that was pretty cool, right? Rise and fall of all these technologies. And I want to take a closer look at a handful of these technologies and see how they have shaped the industry. So, if we look at this graphic here, we see how iTunes crushed music sales. And if we look at this graph, we see vinyl, records again, LPs, EPs, kind of a moderate level as we enter and then slowly fading off. We have cassettes that come up a little bit higher and fade off. And CDs come up very quickly to a fairly high level and again fade off. And then you see these other categories which rise up very quickly. And it looks like great for the industry, right? You have unit sales going through the roof. So why is this graphic called how iTunes crushed music sales. Thoughts on that? So, the important thing to realize is that what we're seeing on the very far right-hand side is single downloads. So people downloading a single song. So with vinyl, cassettes, and CDs, you had to buy the whole thing. If you wanted that one song and you had to get it on a CD, you had to pay like the $15 or $20 for the whole CD. You had to get the 11 trash songs that you didn't want just to get the one song that you really wanted. And now suddenly you're able to just buy that one song for 99 cents. And this is what happens to sales. So the previous slide was unit sales, and this is like the revenues, right? And you see this steady growth, vinyl, cassettes even better, CDs even better, and then just precipitous fall. So imagine that you're working in, the record industry. It's the year 2000 or something, and you're doing CDs, and you're like, CDs, man, they keep going up. Things are looking good. And you get to like 96% control of the market. 96% of the music that people are buying is via your platform of CDs. You're probably going to be feeling pretty amazing. Like things are not going to rock your little boat. You got control of the situation, and then this new technology comes along, totally disrupts the market. And we're still feeling that disruption, right? The music industry is still trying to coalesce on a dominant technology. I think we're moving in that direction toward paid subscriptions, but we're not necessarily there yet. It was at roughly 50% as of 2019. I think it'll continue moving that direction, but something you need to ask yourself is, when we're seeing these rapid changes over this 45-year period, even the last 10 years, we've seen huge changes in this industry. What should we expect to happen over the next 5, 10, 20 years? Probably more rapid wholesale changes to this industry. And we're seeing this across not just this one industry, but a whole host of industries. So we can look at some things that are changing essentially exponentially over time. The annual size of the global data sphere, so that's just how much data exists in the world, changing essentially exponentially. World population changing nearly exponentially at this point. The atmospheric carbon dioxide increasing exponentially, or at least pseudo-exponentially at this point. The stock indices changing essentially exponentially. You have the U.S. like GDP, debt, all that stuff, or the debt and the deficit increasing essentially exponentially. Crazy, right? So what are we to do? How do we address these truths? How do we keep up with the rapid pace of change? Well, a researcher called Lewin in the 1950s offered us this model of change, wherein we view ourselves and those we seek to manage as cubes of ice, okay? And in order for us to change ourselves, we need merely to melt ourselves back into water and then pour ourselves into a differently shaped container, refreeze ourselves, and we've gone from a block of ice to an arrow of ice. It's a little simple. It has some utility as a framework, but a little too simple for my tastes. And that's why I like to discuss the book Switch in class. And you have a reading about this book Switch. This is going to be helpful in terms of change management for dealing with employees, yourself, and is also highly relevant to the pitch scripts we're working on. The whole reason I have the call to arms section in our pitch scripts is so that we can practice these change management techniques. So take the techniques from this book and apply them directly to your pitch scripts in the call to arms section. And also apply them to your workplaces, apply them to your own life. They're very helpful. In this book, we're dealing with the metaphor of the rider, the elephant, and the path. There's a summary in the syllabus, so I'm not going to spend any time talking about it right now, but please read that summary, and we should be able to talk about it during lecture. So I think I'll quit here, and hope it's been enjoyable. Please reach out if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you for your time.